The galaxy had always whispered strange things about Earth. It was a quiet blue world sitting far from the center of power, alone in its solar system, surrounded by nothing but lifeless planets and cold space. The other empires didn't bother with Earth. It was considered a primitive world, isolated and unimportant. But the Zarketh Empire, the strongest and most advanced civilization in the known galaxy, saw something different. To them, Earth was an opportunity. A place full of resources. A planet with growing potential. A threat that might someday rise unless it was crushed first. The Supreme Council of the Zarketh Empire didn't believe in waiting. They had conquered thousands of worlds without failure. Earth, to them, was just another name to be erased. So they prepared the largest invasion fleet ever created, 10,000 warships, each one armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy cities, moons, even small planets. It was an army built to terrify, built to destroy. And it was heading straight for Earth. The journey to Sol System was uneventful at first. The fleet passed through star systems with ease. No one dared to challenge the Zarketh. Other races watched in silence, choosing not to get involved. They remembered what had happened to those who stood in the Empire's way. They knew the price of resistance. Still, there were warnings. The ancient Mirax scribes spoke of Earth as the sleeping world, a planet that had survived something terrible long ago. Their writings were dismissed as superstition. The Zarketh didn't believe in ghost stories. They believed in firepower. And so, the fleet entered Earth's solar system without hesitation, confident that they would take control before the humans even had a chance to react. But something felt wrong from the beginning. The outer planets were too quiet. The moons seemed too still. There were no defense systems in orbit, no fleets waiting, no signs of panic from the planet below. Earth was just there, spinning slowly, covered in clouds and oceans, with billions of lives going about their day, completely unaware or perhaps unconcerned about the incoming doom. This silence should have made the Zarketh feel victorious, but instead it made them uneasy. When they tried to scan the planet, their systems glitched. When they attempted to communicate with each other, strange signals interfered. Some ships reported missing crew members. Others reported hearing a low hum that didn't come from their own equipment. It was as if Earth itself was watching them. Not with satellites, not with radar, but with something deeper, something older. Still, the admirals of the Zarketh fleet pushed forward. They couldn't afford to look weak. 10,000 ships were more than enough to crush any resistance. They positioned themselves around the planet in perfect formation. From orbit, Earth looked defenseless. Its skies were peaceful, its cities untouched. But just before the invasion was scheduled to begin, several ships lost power at once. No explosions. No weapons fired. They simply shut down and drifted. The Zarketh tried to recover them, but every recovery vessel vanished, one by one. No escape pods. No wreckage. Just silence. Then came the images. One scout ship managed to send a single video feed before disappearing. It showed something unbelievable, Earth's clouds moving like they had purpose. Like they were alive. Lightning patterns forming symbols. Oceans glowing for seconds at a time, then going dark again. It made no sense, but the fleet saw it, and it was real. Some of the officers began to whisper about what they had heard, old rumors that Earth had not always been primitive, that it had once faced extinction and survived something beyond comprehension, something it had learned from, something it had become. But before anyone could act on their fear, the first human ship appeared. It didn't come from Earth's surface. It came from behind one of Jupiter's moons. Small, silent, dark. It didn't look like much. No bright lights. No threatening weapons. But within seconds, it launched a single burst of energy. One of the Zarketh dreadnoughts the size of a floating city was gone. Not damaged. Not crippled. Gone. Vaporized in an instant. Panic spread through the fleet like fire in dry grass. The humans didn't wait. More ships appeared, but not in groups. They came one by one, from different directions, attacking with deadly accuracy. They didn't talk. They didn't declare war. They simply struck. And each time they struck, another Zarketh ship was erased. The admirals ordered a retreat from low orbit. They tried to regroup, to understand the enemy. But the humans had already vanished again, back into the dark. For the first time in history, the Zarketh fleet was afraid. They had come expecting surrender. What they found was silence, shadows, and an enemy that didn't follow the rules of war. The longer they stayed, the more ships they lost. And Earth? It never fired a single missile from the surface. It just watched. Like it was studying them. The command vessel, Supreme Admiral Velkosh, stared at the planet on his screen. There was no battle taking place on the ground. The people below seemed to go on with their lives. Cars moved through cities. Planes crossed the sky. Children played in parks. And yet, the skies above them were filled with the remains of the greatest fleet in galactic history. Earth was calm. Like it knew this would happen. Like it had prepared for it in ways no one understood. Velkosh realized something in that moment. Earth wasn't just a target. It was a trap. And they had walked right into it.ase. The shattered remnants of the once invincible Zarketh fleet floated helplessly in orbit. Those who remained alive began to feel something far stranger than fear, confusion, mixed with the unsettling sense of being observed, not just by an enemy fleet, but by the planet itself. Earth did not behave like any other world they had ever conquered. It didn't scream, didn't launch missiles from its surface, didn't send out pleas for mercy. It just watched, calmly, as if it had been expecting this invasion for a very long time. From the shadows of space, strange patterns began to appear on Earth's atmosphere, clouds reshaping in unnatural ways, almost like symbols or warnings. Massive weather systems began to form, but they didn't follow any logic known to Zarketh science. Thunderstorms rolled across the oceans in perfect circles, glowing with blue and green flashes that didn't seem natural. In the northern hemisphere, the auroras flared brighter than they ever had before, dancing like living things, shifting shapes that resembled ships and eyes and faces. At first, the fleet's scientists dismissed it as Earth's environment reacting to the chaos in orbit, but then the data revealed something they couldn't explain. These weather changes weren't random. They were timed perfectly with every Zarketh action. Every time a scouting vessel moved, the clouds above shifted. Every time a signal was sent, the winds changed direction. It was almost like Earth was responding, adapting, learning from each move. The planet was quiet, but not passive. It was watching, waiting, analyzing every piece of technology, every weakness, every hesitation. Some of the commanders tried to send drones down to the surface, but none returned. They vanished before reaching the lower atmosphere, and in their place, strange signals came back, low-frequency sounds that made even the most advanced translators fail. It wasn't language. It wasn't noise. It felt like a pulse, like the heartbeat of something massive and ancient. Ships began picking up static that contained images, not broadcasts, but somehow visions of human eyes staring through their own cameras, human voices whispering their names in their own language, and cities they had never seen before glowing in the dark. It wasn't coming from a satellite. It wasn't coming from any ship. It was coming from Earth itself. Panic began to spread quietly through the lower ranks. Soldiers started refusing orders. Engineers locked themselves in their rooms, unable to explain why the lights kept flickering in patterns they swore resembled Morse code. Even the artificial intelligences on board the warships started to show glitches, freezing whenever they were asked to analyze Earth's surface. They would pause, restart, and then simply reply with the same phrase, "Not recommended." The Supreme Council had never seen anything like it. They didn't understand that this was not a war. They were inside something else entirely, something they couldn't control. The fear deepened when several ships attempted to flee the solar system. The first two vanished within seconds of activating their engines, as if swallowed by the void. No debris, no distress signals. The remaining ships hesitated, and in that hesitation, Earth responded again. Strange orbs of light began to rise from the oceans, moving slowly through space like sentinels. They didn't attack, but they followed every ship, maintaining perfect distance, always visible, never blinking. One commander tried to destroy one of the orbs. The moment the weapon fired, the ship shut down completely, lights off, engines dead, crew unconscious. When it came back online, all the internal files had been erased, and a single new message had been added to the logs. Do not provoke what you do not understand. For a race that had believed in logic and strength, the Zarketh were now drowning in fear of something they couldn't measure or predict. Earth wasn't using violence. It was using something worse: patience and understanding. It knew them better than they knew themselves. Its oceans reflected their movements. Its forests pulsed when they changed formation. Even the animals seemed to move in strange patterns visible from space, as if forming signals meant only for those watching from above. Earth was alive, not just biologically, but intellectually and possibly spiritually. Some began to believe the humans weren't even the real danger, that the planet itself had changed over time, becoming something more than just rock and water. Maybe the humans had built it into this. Maybe it had always been this way. Maybe Earth had once been a battleground for something much greater than anything the Zarketh could imagine. And now, it was ready for another fight. The worst part was that the humans still hadn't said a word. No messages. No broadcasts. Their ships stayed hidden. Their presence was silent. They didn't need to show their faces because Earth was already doing the talking. The few survivors who dared to whisper to each other began to realize the terrible truth. This wasn't just a failed invasion. This was a test. Earth had allowed them to come this far, to see what they would do, to see how they would act under pressure, to measure their strength, and most importantly, to expose their weaknesses. And now, it was recording everything. The planet itself had become a mirror to the invaders, showing them not what Earth was, but what they were. And what they saw in that reflection was fear, confusion, and failure. As the remaining ships floated helplessly in the dark, surrounded by a world that watched in silence, the final horror began to set in. Earth didn't need to chase them away. It didn't need to destroy them. It only needed to understand them. Because once it understood them, it owned them. And once it owned them, there would be nowhere left in the galaxy to hide. For days, the shattered fleet hovered above the Earth in silence, paralyzed by fear, lost in confusion, and watched closely by the planet that had not yet fought back, not directly. But everything changed the moment a strange signal blinked across every surviving control panel at the same time. It was short, encrypted in a way the Zarketh had never seen, yet every ship somehow understood the message: "You've seen enough." Within seconds, the human response began, not loud or chaotic, but sharp and terrifyingly precise. From beneath Earth's surface, countless unknown launch sites activated simultaneously. These weren't the kind of weapons the Zarketh expected. They didn't look like missiles or traditional projectiles. They looked like black spears of light, bending gravity as they rose, tearing through the atmosphere without leaving a trail. The first strike hit the Zarketh command ship, not with an explosion, but with silence. Systems died, metal turned cold, and lights faded as if the ship had simply been unplugged from reality. The crew on board couldn't scream. They couldn't move. They floated in the dark, staring into the core of something they couldn't understand, and then the entire vessel simply vanished, pulled apart by invisible forces that made no noise, left no trace, and sent no debris. The remaining fleet panicked, scattering like insects, but Earth had already adapted. Human warships began to appear, not from space, but from between folds of reality. It was as if the humans had learned how to step between space and time, creating doorways in the void itself. These ships were smaller than the Zarketh fleet, but they moved with impossible speed, teleporting across the battlefield without any propulsion, striking with weapons that ignored shields and armor completely. The Zarketh fired everything they had: plasma, antimatter, even weapons designed to disrupt molecular structure, but nothing touched the human ships. Their attacks passed through them, like illusions, and each time they failed, another human vessel would blink into view and slice a warship apart with a single pulse of light. The strikes were not random, they were surgical. Every human move had purpose: targeting engines, communication relays, power cores. They weren't trying to destroy the fleet. They were disabling it, one ship at a time, forcing each Zarketh vessel into silence. Some tried to flee, but the planet itself responded again. Gravity shifted in strange patterns. Time slowed down around fleeing ships, and some vessels found themselves pulled back toward Earth without explanation, as if the space around them had changed direction. For the first time in their history, the Zarketh realized they were not the superior force. They were being hunted, studied, and dismantled by a race they had once called primitive. But the worst part wasn't the weapons, it was the silence. The humans still didn't speak. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't taunt. They simply acted with perfect coordination, each attack a reminder that Earth had never been unprepared. It had just been waiting for the right moment. One by one, the fleet's high-ranking officers began to fall into madness. The horror of facing an enemy that didn't speak, didn't bleed, and didn't die was too much. On board the few remaining ships, crew members reported hallucinations, visions of Earth, of cities they had never seen, of voices whispering in their language. One soldier swore he heard his mother's voice, calling from Earth's surface. Another began to see strange symbols floating in the air, symbols that weren't there before, glowing in patterns that followed him from room to room. The psychological war had begun, and Earth was winning it without effort. The humans had clearly developed technologies far beyond the Zarketh understanding, but it wasn't just about tech, it was about knowledge. Earth knew how to break a mind. It knew how to use silence as a weapon. It knew that fear was stronger than fire. The final blow came when a human ship finally made contact. Not through words, but by simply appearing in the center of the fleet, undetected, untouchable, and then projecting a single image to every screen. Earth, as seen from orbit, with the message, "This is your only warning." No attack followed. No further destruction. Just the image, and then complete stillness. It wasn't mercy, it was a message. Earth was not afraid. It didn't need to chase or kill. It was showing control. And in that moment, the surviving Zarketh finally understood the scale of their mistake. This planet wasn't just defending itself. It was teaching them a lesson. It had let them come, watched them fail, studied their tactics, and then dismantled their army like a puzzle. The few survivors who managed to escape knew one thing with certainty: Earth wasn't just another planet, it was a living trap, and the humans were its guardians, evolved by fear, shaped by centuries of conflict, and now reborn as something terrifyingly perfect. The Zarketh would never forget what they saw that day. Not because of what was lost, but because of what they were allowed to keep, the memory of a world that had looked into the eyes of an empire and made it kneel without speaking a single word. The moment the broken remnants of the once mighty Zarketh fleet returned home, it was clear that something deep and permanent had changed, not just in their numbers or power, but in their soul. The empire that had lasted for centuries, ruling with fear and strength, now stood on the edge of silence, stunned by a defeat they had never imagined. Their cities, though still shining and tall, felt hollow as the returning soldiers walked through them like shadows, their minds echoing with the silent destruction they had witnessed above Earth. High Command demanded answers, but none could explain what had truly happened. How do you describe a war you never understood? How do you report a battle where every strategy failed before it even began? The generals argued, the leaders blamed each other, and the scientists who had laughed at Earth's primitive technology now sat shaking in their chairs, afraid even to study the data that came back with the survivors. Those few who had seen the human ships up close refused to speak much, but the little they shared spread like wildfire whispers of silent weapons, ships that moved without engines, and a planet that watched like a predator. Panic began to spread, not from attack, but from the memory of it. Worlds that once cheered when the fleet left for Earth now questioned everything. If Earth had defeated the strongest invasion force ever built without even trying, what else were they hiding? Could they strike across galaxies? Could they already be watching? These questions broke the Empire faster than any weapon. Colonies that had long hated Zarketh rule started to rebel. They no longer feared punishment because they believed Zarketh couldn't even protect itself. Systems stopped sending resources. Military bases were abandoned. Trade routes fell silent. The vast machine of the empire, which once ran like a beast with 1,000 hearts, began to shut down, one pulse at a time. On the capital world, the emperor himself, once proud and untouchable, now sat alone in the throne core, staring at a single image, Earth, floating in space, untouched, unmoved, unbothered. It was the same image the humans had shown, the only message they ever sent. This is your only warning. That sentence, burned into every mind, did more damage than any bomb. It wasn't a threat, it was a fact. A quiet reminder that power meant nothing when used without understanding. As more stories came in, even from distant scouts, strange things were reported. Human tech had started appearing across the stars, not through trade, not through contact, but like secrets leaking into reality. Small devices were found on abandoned ships, strange codes in old databanks, symbols that seemed to move when no one was watching. The fear returned, not as war, but as paranoia. Was Earth still watching? Had they left something behind, or were they already among them? Zarketh society, built on control, began to tear itself apart from the inside. Trust disappeared. Commanders accused one another of failure, spies reported imaginary threats, and the once united voice of the empire turned into a storm of arguments, betrayals, and chaos. Whole planets declared independence, raising their own flags, swearing never again to follow leaders who had sent their finest into the jaws of something they didn't understand. On one of the outer colonies, a former fleet captain, one of the very few who escaped Earth's wrath, stood in front of a crowd and said, "We are not who we thought we were. Earth didn't just beat us, they showed us our truth." His words were recorded, banned, and then spread even faster. In the following days, statues were torn down, flags burned, and the Zarketh symbol once carved into the hearts of 1,000 worlds was erased pixel by pixel, stone by stone. No bombs fell. No armies marched. And yet, the empire that had lasted longer than many stars crumbled into dust. Scholars would later say it was the first time in galactic history that an empire died from silence. Earth hadn't needed to conquer. It had simply shown what it could do, then walked away. That silence, that choice to spare, had echoed louder than any war cry. The Zarketh, built on fear, could not survive without being feared, and Earth had taken that away in a single, perfect moment. What remained of the Empire's leadership fled, not to rebuild, but to hide. In secret rooms beneath dead cities, they whispered about starting over, about creating new weapons, about revenge. But none dared say it out loud, not truly because every time they closed their eyes, they saw the same thing, a black Earth ship, appearing without warning, staring without emotion, and a single message glowing in cold white light, "This is your only warning." And deep down, they knew. Earth was still watching. Long after the collapse of the mighty Zarketh Empire, and long after the shattered fleets limped home in silence, the galaxy still whispered about Earth not as a planet of war, but as something far more dangerous, a mystery that could not be solved. Many had theories. Some believed the humans were ancient guardians, others thought they were survivors of a forgotten war older than the stars, but no one could deny the simple, haunting fact Earth had faced the largest invasion in galactic history and had emerged untouched. There were no victory parades, no broadcasts from the humans, no threats or warnings, only silence and a single message, left behind in the shattered memory cores of Zarketh ships, hidden deep inside data structures so advanced that most species couldn't even read them properly. It was discovered by accident, found in a wrecked warship drifting near a dead moon. A scavenger ship cracked the encrypted core while looking for spare metals, and what they found froze their systems and their blood. The message wasn't long, just a few lines, written in clear, direct human language, translated automatically to every major tongue the galaxy spoke. It didn't carry anger or pride or even hatred. It was calm, almost quiet. "We saw your fleet coming before you saw our sun. We let you reach our orbit to understand who you are. You chose war. We chose silence. You fired first. We ended it. Learn from this. We are not your enemies, but we are not your prey." The message wasn't just data, it was a signal wrapped in layers of code that triggered visions, showed images of Earth's surface, maps of human cities, and then, one by one, files of every Zarketh ship destroyed. Their blueprints, their weaknesses, everything the humans had learned in mere moments. It was a gift and a warning, both in the same breath. The scavengers panicked, sent it to nearby systems, and soon it reached every corner of the galaxy. The reaction was instant. Silence fell across broadcast networks. Armies stood down. Even pirate fleets vanished behind closed doors. Their message didn't demand submission, didn't threaten destruction, didn't ask for alliances. It only offered a choice: remember what happened, and choose wisely in the future. That was all. And yet, it was everything. On hundreds of worlds, governments met in secret to discuss how to respond. Should they reach out to Earth? Should they apologize? Should they hide? But Earth never answered any calls, never returned any signals. Their skies remained closed, their borders quiet. The humans had spoken once and then watched. That silence became the loudest voice in the galaxy. In time, statues were raised on neutral planet statues, not of human warriors, but of an empty Earth ship hovering in space, surrounded by the words of the message. They were carved into crystal, stone, even the air itself using light fields. Scholars studied the message, debated its meaning, and entire philosophies were born from the silence it carried. Some believed Earth was testing the galaxy. Others believed the humans had suffered long ago and learned the cost of war, choosing not to repeat it unless forced. A few believed the humans were waiting for something, maybe a challenge worth their strength, maybe an ally with equal wisdom. But none could deny this Earth had changed the galaxy without conquering a single world. In classrooms, children were taught about Earth not as an enemy, but as a mirror, something to study, to understand, and to respect. Songs were written about the black ships of Earth. Legends grew about a race that chose silence over violence, power over pride. Even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, where chaos once ruled, people now spoke more carefully, acted with more thought. The humans had taught them something no empire ever could. Fear fades, but respect shapes the future. And somewhere beyond the stars, Earth remained still. No fleets were built. No ambassadors sent. But quiet probes were seen in distant systems, small, unarmed, watching. Some welcomed them. Some hid. But none dared shoot. The message they left behind was still alive, still traveling, still changing everything. Because deep down, every species now knew one thing for sure: if Earth ever spoke again, the galaxy would listen. And that was all the humans needed to win.